Hi everyone. This PowerPoint and narration is meant to help you guys through Project 2, which is your critical analysis essay. I want to start off by explaining what the goal of this particular assignment is. And that's really to get you guys to use your critical thinking skills. And if you've read the project handout, which you should have, you know that you need to choose an article that's on your topic. And essentially you're engaging in a conversation with an article and with the author who has written it through an essay. All of your arguments should come from your own beliefs and your close reading of the text. Other than the article that you are responding to, you do not need to go out and find any other outside sources. Everything should be coming, again, from your own brain, essentially. So let's talk about how to get started. The first step that you need to do is to choose an article that is relevant to your topic. Again, this is the same topic that you did your annotated bibliography on. And that article can come from your annotated bibliography, or it could be an entirely new source. That's up to you. The one major requirement is that your article must have some kind of argument present. Okay, it cannot be just a purely informative article. It needs to take some kind of stance on your issue, identifying reasons why something is happening, making an argument for or against something. So just make sure that there is some kind of argument present, because if you have just an informative article, you're really not going to be able to accomplish this project. Once you choose your article, your next step is to read it in depth and take notes. And I suggest that you read the article at least 3 times. And when you are going through it, your job is to pick out the author's thesis or their main overarching argument. And then you want to identify 3 to 5 main points that the author makes in the essay. There may be more than that, but you're going to want to choose 3 to 5 that you'll be using as discussion points for your body paragraphs. Once you have read and taken your thorough notes, you're ready to begin actually writing your essay. And your essay is going to include an introduction paragraph, 3 to 5 body paragraphs, depending on how long the article you're analyzing is, and eventually a conclusion paragraph. You're also going to need to have a reference page with an APA citation for your article. So just like what you did with your annotated bibliography, that first piece that you would put on each of your entries, that's what you need on your reference page. When you're writing your introduction paragraph, it should include a couple of things. All right? It should give the title of the article, the author, and then a brief summary and a couple of sentences of what the article was about. Your thesis statement, which should appear at the end of your introduction paragraph, should explain whether or not you agree with the statements in the article and or whether you believe the article to be convincing or not. Basically, did they do a good job of getting their point across, and did it get you to believe their side of the argument, or are you left with some questions? One thing is that it's okay to have mixed feelings about the article and to agree with some points and disagree with others. That's perfectly acceptable. And you can say that in your thesis statement if that's what happens. When you're writing your body paragraphs, each one of them should do a couple of things. First, they're going to identify one main point that the author makes in the essay. Okay, so each body paragraph will address a single point, and then explain whether or not you agree with the point and why. And when you are writing these body paragraphs and you're responding to the main points, there's essentially 3 potential ways to respond to their main points. You can say yes, or I agree with you. You can say no, or I don't agree. And you can kind of be on the fence. You can say, okay, I kind of agree with some of your points, but I think there's some things that you're missing. So let's take a look at each one of those. If you're saying yes or I agree, you need to do more than just say yes. You need to explain why you are agreeing and make sure that you're actually contributing to the conversation, moving the point forward. There's a couple of different ways that you can do this. These are not exhaustive lists, but these are just some examples. The first is that you can point out unnoticed implications. So if you see something that means, that has consequences that the author hasn't necessarily pointed out, that's something that you can do. You can explain complicated points in order to make it more clear for the reader. This may be particularly helpful if you have an article that has a lot of jargon and technical language that your average reader may not understand. And finally, you can relate it to your own experience or another example. It's perfectly acceptable for this critical analysis essay to use I and to use first person. I'm expecting you to do that, and that's kind of the whole goal of this particular assignment. If you're saying no or I disagree, you still need to explain why you disagree. All right, and so here's a couple of examples. You could disagree because another's argument fails to take into account relevant factors. So if you feel that there is something that's being left out that needs to be considered in the argument. If it's based on faulty or false logic. If it's based on faulty or incomplete evidence. Or if it overlooks what you take to be the real issue. So if they're talking about something but there's a deeper underlying issue that you feel isn't being addressed in the article, then that is something that you can also take as a point of disagreement. Finally, if you're saying, okay, but you're on the fence, remember it's acceptable to have mixed feelings on an issue, and you can always agree with part of what an author is saying but disagree with another part. And you may agree with an overall point that the author is making, but you may have different reasons than what the author presents for agreeing with their overall point. You also may agree but feel that part of their argument or part of an issue is more important than what that author is talking about. So if an author says that there's reason A that this is happening and there's reason B that this is happening, you could say, okay, I see these two reasons, but I feel that reason B is more important than reason A, and they need to take that into consideration. Again, this is not an exhaustive list. There are plenty of other reasons to agree, disagree, or be on the fence about things, but this is just to give you guys some examples for when you're reading and starting to brainstorm for your body paragraphs. One other thing that you want to make sure that you're doing is including direct quotes from your article. However, the quotes should only be 1 to 2 sentences in length, and they're really not there to dominate the paragraph. It's really more to act as support. Okay? Whenever you quote from the source, you need to introduce it. Don't just drop a quote in there without giving some kind of introductory phrase. And I've given you a couple of examples here. So you could start out with something like, the author states, and then give the quote. You can use the author's last name and say, so-and-so argues that, give the quote. The writer claims. Basically, any of those are acceptable. The one thing is that you want to be sure that you're varying your phrasing. Don't consistently use the same introductory phrase. It gets repetitive, and it's going to kind of jar your reader if you keep using the same thing over and over again. One thing I want to point out is that whenever you're writing in an academic setting, you should be using the author's last name. Don't use the author's first name. They're not your friends. They're not somebody that you know. It's somebody that you're quoting from for an academic source. So you either need to use their entire name or just their last name, but not just first names. When you are putting your direct quotes in your essay, you need to be sure that they are indicated by quotation marks, okay? Because they are taken word for word from the original source. If you use the author's last name in the introduction phrase, you need to follow it with the year of publication in parentheses. You only need the year, not the month or the day. So you can see in this example here, if I was quoting from somebody whose last name was McMillan, then I would follow it with the date of publication and then continue with my introductory phrase, states that, and then give the quote. When we are dealing with APA style, the author's last name and the year always stay together. So this is one option, so author and year in an introductory phrase, or if you don't include the author's last name in an introductory phrase, you need to follow the quote with the last name and the year in parentheses. So here's another example. So if I say the author believes that and then give the quote, I then give their last name and the year in parentheses after the quote. And I want you guys to note that after the quote, but inside the quotation marks, there's a comma, and that your final punctuation doesn't come until after the author's last name and the year in parentheses. So make sure that if you are putting the parentheses with the in-text citation, that the period does not come until after that. That's pretty much the basics of how to go about doing your Project 2 critical analysis. If you are still confused, or if you're not sure, or if you're having difficulties finding an article that you feel is appropriate, you can always come visit me during my office hours. You can send me an email. You can give me a call, or you can visit the Oral and Written Communication Center on campus. The people there are always more than willing to help you, and the best time really to go and visit them is at the beginning of an assignment. So if that's a possibility for you and you're struggling, I highly recommend that. But I hope this video has helped. And again, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to contact me.